thank you all for coming. Looks like the rain held off for us, which is good. So I think we have a treat for you tonight. Interesting subject, pretty timely. And I'm very pleased to have a colleague and a friend, Andy Schectman, who flew in from Florida last night and tonight to do these presentations. And you'll see very quickly when Andy gets rolling that he has an enormous, tremendous grasp of the geopolitical situation and economic situation, in addition to precious metals. In fact, sometimes we have to tackle him because it gets rambling a little bit, but it's all important and it's all good. And he's going to explain a lot about what's going on. We're going to make some critical junctures here on a few fronts. And so I want to just have some opening comments. So Miles Franklin is his company, 36 years old. What? Oh, it's a little crooked?
Yeah.
Kevin will make it up crooked. It's just the thing on the projector. Anyway, Miles Franklin's not your typical precious metals firm. They're based in Minnesota. Minnesota is the only state in the country that requires licensing and bonding and all kinds of strictures. A lot of precious metals dealers do not want anything to do with Minnesota, and that's where Andy is headquartered. And they've done $13 billion of business through the years with no complaints, which is remarkable. And so, extremely knowledgeable, huge inventory, price competitive, great service, great people. So, so Andy I think will amaze you. In the meantime, you know me, sometimes Louis is here. I don't have Louis tonight, but I do have Dr. Jose. Doc, can you stand up and say hi to everybody? So if I'm not around, you know, Jose, you may or may not know, he's our tax and Roth conversion guy and other stuff. So if I'm not around, feel free to book him. You know, I should mention, obviously, we want to talk about gold and silver tonight, but we gave you green response sheets. Please feel free if you need to talk to the attorney or long-term care or tax planning or whatever else is on the bottom of that sheet. You know, please feel free to come in and talk about that stuff. Obviously, we are more concerned right now about gold and silver, but all that stuff is important as well. And so Dr. Jose is available. Christina's not here tonight, but she's our leading estate planning attorney. A lot of you have worked with her before. And she's available as well if you need to see her for trusts or wills or POAs or any of that type of important stuff. And I do have my Medicare guy here. Peter, where's Peter? Pete, say hi to everybody. Peter, for health insurance or Medicare and subs, Peter's available anytime. Thank you, Peter. And so I want to start with what I think is interesting, a brief history of money. So gold, Andy's going to make the case to you that gold and silver are wealth. They're not investments, they're wealth. So going back to pharaohs and kings and queens, they held it in gold and silver, right? So it's wealth. So for example, 100 years ago, 1 ounce of gold was a $20 gold piece. And that bought a man a good suit of clothes and tie and shirt and shoes. Today, at $3,700, it's a good suit, tie, and shirt and shoes, right? 50 years ago, 1 ounce of silver got you 10 or 12 gallons of gas. 45 bucks, 10 or 12 gallons of gas. So you see the point, it takes a lot more of the paper, right? 45 pieces of paper, same 1 ounce of silver. So it holds its value over time. So it may look like silver and gold is going up, but really it's the paper going down, but that's a little abstruse. Another interesting thing, even today, in many countries and languages, the word for money and silver is the same. In all of these countries and cultures, the word for money and silver is the same even today. That's telling. In Hebrew, silver, kesef. So one of the things we need to look at, particularly with the markets in real estate and stocks at all-time highs, let's look at other assets. So do we think, from today's levels, do we think that art and antiques will double or triple in the next 3 to 5 years? I don't think so. If you think about your house, houses on both coasts, are they going to double and triple again anytime soon? Not too likely. Maybe the other way. Office buildings, hotels, resorts, malls, retail. So the commercial real estate situation is dreadful. We don't have time to go into it tonight, but we have a slow and steady bank crisis brewing. You know, if we default on a mortgage, it's 300 grand, it's 800 grand. But when you lose an office tower or a mall or something, it's hundreds of millions. The banks cannot sustain that. And so certainly commercial real estate does not look too good at this juncture. Do we think stocks will double or triple again in value next 3 to 5 years? I don't think so. I hope so. Bonds, interest rates are heading back down. So unless they go negative, we have very limited upside in bonds. And it might surprise you to learn that silver and gold have actually outperformed the stock market for the last 20 or 25 years. Everybody thinks, you know, stocks, because it has been, you know, really good 10 or 15 years. So this is called the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. And I circled, you probably can't see it in purple. The last 10 years, this is across the country, the price of houses has doubled. Now, obviously on the East Coast and West Coast, it's done more than that. But housing is at all-time highs. This is the 10-year on the S&P 500. Bottom left, 10 years ago, we were, exactly 10 years ago, we were a little under 2,000. We're over 6,000, so that's a triple, big move. But when we look at, maybe hard to see, the green line at the bottom, this is gold, stocks, bonds, and the US dollar. Doesn't look like it because it's been so gradual and incremental, but the green, the dollar has lost 75% of its buying power over 25 years. Again, it doesn't seem, we haven't experienced really brutal inflation. It's been slow and steady, but it's important. All you have to do is go out to dinner to know that, right? Or go to a concert or a football game. Bonds about 4%. You may remember, why is that so low for 20 years? Because there was a period where bonds were 1% for 12 years, right? Stocks almost 8. So wait a minute, stocks have been better than 8. Well, not the first 12 years. We'll look at that in a minute. And gold, believe it or not, over 9% compounded for 25 years. So a lot of people are not aware of that. So for example, at the beginning of the turn of the century, the S&P index was 1425. 10 years later, it was 1123, down 21%. 10 years. In fact, on 12/31/11, after 12 years, it was still down about 9%, 13%. So people, you know, the first 12 years of this century, stocks were negative. That's a long time. People forget that because it's been so great after that. So then after being negative for 12 years, we've had an incredible 16.5-year run. So if you look at those two, you see the blue peaks and the valleys. Over time, both of those declines, that's the 01-02 crash, the tech crash, and then the 08-09 housing and bank crisis. Both times, the S&P fell about 50%. Keep that in mind. The markets can fall 50%. And so, after this incredible 16.5-year run, which is not normal either, by the way, could we see 5 or 10 years of subpar returns? Could the market disappoint us for 10 or 12 years again? It's possible, right? So keep in mind, this is a little tongue-in-cheek here, but it's important. Keep this in mind if you're in the stock market. If you have $1 million, and it goes up 50%, and then it goes down 50%, you're even, right? Up 50, down 50, no, you're not even. It's not the way the math works. Right? So we go to $1.5 million, and then we lose. Last 2 bear markets were 50. The average is 40. So keep that in mind. This is important. Left-hand column here, blue box on the left-hand side. Spring of '96, the tech boom, the internet, the dot-com thing gets rolling, and it's massive. And then it crashes in 01 and 02, okay? And then the next crash, you see the middle of the screen, another peak by 07, we're back at highs. And then we have the housing and the banking crisis. And the red box in the middle, at the low in the spring of 09, believe it or not, the market is exactly where it was 13 years earlier, 13 years of zero. So that's rare, but that happens too. Just be aware, you don't want to hit and I'm not sitting here projecting a 13-year zero situation, but you know, 5 and 8, 12 years, just happen in gold, it can happen in real estate. Just be aware that all assets have a cycle. Trees do not grow to the sky. By contrast, so this is interesting, turn of the century, silver was a little over $5 an ounce. 10 years later, almost 17. And in the middle of the page there on yellow, on 12/31/11, after 12 years, silver was 27 bucks, up 5 times. So hear me, the same time stocks were negative for 12 years, you made 5 times your money in silver. So that's why it's important. We want you to have a little bit of everything, right? And as of yesterday, silver's at 44, 45 bucks, 8 times your money in 25 years. This is the 10-year silver chart. A lot of nothing from 15 to 20. A little, it's been pretty miserable for a while, and recently we're really rock and rolling. Maybe more importantly, the 20-year chart, the peak there on the left side is the spring of 11, April of 11. We hit just under 50 bucks. And so as good as silver has been the last year or two, we're still not back to the high of 14 years ago. So everything, again, if we go to dinner, if we go to a ball game, everything else is at 40-year highs in terms of inflation. And silver is not back where it was yet. So anybody who thinks that gold and silver is too late, they've had a big move, don't say that. It's early. By the way, silver and gold, precious metals, bull markets go for 10 or 15 years, just like stocks, just like real estate, very long time. We're at the beginning. So silver, one of the reasons why silver has not participated, and it's too much to go into tonight, but there are 8 banks, Andy may mention this, he may not, there are some big banks here and in Europe that have continued to short and keep silver beat up. Gold also, but silver more directly. Recently, a tech billionaire just bought an enormous amount of physical silver. It says 1.5% of the world's annual supply. And 10-year gold chart, again, nice and steady, but nothing dramatic until recently. April of 24, 18 months ago, gold was 2,000 bucks, and it was 2,000 bucks in April of 11. 14 years, nothing. And here we are at 3,800. 20 years, you can see a little more dramatic. Long time, and you may ask yourself, if the yen and the euro and the dollar, if everybody printed incredible amounts of paper money for those 14 years, how could gold and silver do nothing for 14 years? A couple days ago, Morgan Stanley, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, this is extremely big news, I'm sure Andy will mention this, they went to instead of the traditional 60-40, Morgan Stanley, can you imagine Morgan Stanley, the paper guys, are telling you to put 20% of your portfolio in gold. Never thought I'd see it. Tied to, over time, tied to the price is the paper problem, right? So in 2010, the debt was 13 trillion, gold was 1,400 bucks. 10 years later, the debt was 27 trillion, gold starts waking up. Today, just recently, we hit 37 trillion, and gold was 3,800. And I don't know if you've ever looked at it, I don't have time to show you, but no one, the Germans, the British, the Koreans, the Japanese, no one is getting paid trillions of dollars. Ain't happening, it's not a real number. Nobody is getting paid 38 trillion, not gonna happen. So there's problems coming, right? It's not, you can't just print money. And so on the bottom of the screen is interesting. So as good as the stock market's done, remember the first 12 years were not good. So looking back over 25 and a half years, we're up 4.5 times in stocks, pretty good. The gold is up 13 times and silver is up 8 times. So depending on your time frame, please don't forget about gold and silver. We're gonna give you a lot of reasons tonight why silver in particular, gold usually leads, but silver could be $100, $200, $300 an ounce from today's price levels. We think maybe a great 5 to 10 year run. If we look back to that April 25th high, almost 50 bucks, and we adjust for inflation 14 years later, silver's got to go to almost $72 to be equal. Right, so we're nowhere near that. There was a spike, it's a little artificial because the Hunt brothers were trying to trap it, but silver actually hit close to 50 a long time ago. And if we do that math from 1980, it's about 200 bucks on silver. So these may seem like extreme numbers, but not really. And so the inflation situation, a lot of you people here, this doesn't really affect you too much, thankfully, but for the general public, this is a big problem. And the other thing they do is, I mean, if you go to dinner anywhere or you go to a concert or a play, you feel it. But in the food stores, they do clever things. My wife will say, look at this, the coffee's the same price. No, Lisa, it's 13 ounces now, it's not 16 ounces. Or the peanut butter is hollowed out at the bottom, or the toilet paper is smaller in the tuna fish. So it looks like it's the same price, but it's really serious inflation. Candy bar smaller, that hurts me. If you can grab a bottle of scotch, don't do this without a bottle of scotch, but usdebtclock.org is an interesting site. A little busy. It shows the current ongoing situation with the debt and all other obligations of the government. Kind of fascinating. And so, not to ruin your dinner, but it's a lot worse than 37 trillion, because there are, on top of that, there are lots and lots of unfunded liabilities, obligations, promises the government has made. And so you can see the concern. We can't really just print money at a faster and faster pace. If you think about a hockey stick, we're up on the handle of the hockey stick. We're adding, $1 trillion every few months. That's just not sustainable. And Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell will come out and tell you it's not sustainable. In the meantime, here we are. So we are more optimistic today than we were about them bending the curve on that, but it's still a serious issue. 3.5 years ago, February 1st of 22, we hit 30 trillion, as you can see. It's very steady, very quick, and 3.5 years later, we're at 37 trillion. Not good. The other thing to keep in mind, and we like gold and platinum and everything else, but silver in particular. So if you're not familiar, silver, every electrical contact in your house uses silver. It's the best conductor, the best reflector. Your cell phones, your smartphones, your refrigerator, solar panels, electric vehicles, medical imaging, everything uses silver. The AI revolution with the servers and chips can't happen without lots of silver. And for 5 years running, we have a supply deficit of silver. 184 million ounces in 23, about 149 million last year, and they think another 117 million short this year. So you have record demand, and you have 5 years in a row of a deficit, and silver's 45 bucks. How can that be, right? So if you are bullish on silver or gold like we are, you want to consider buying it, holding it. We can ship it to you. Governor Murphy got rid of, there was a sales tax until January 1st of 25, which he got rid of, thank God. So cheaper if you want, we can ship it out to you. We can hold it in bricks for you, other places. If you are half as bullish as we are on gold and silver, you may want to do it in a retirement account. So you need to open, there are a handful of IRS-approved IRA custodians that will let us do private equity and private debt and real estate and precious metals, alternative investments. They charge a couple of dollars for that privilege. I think I gave you guys a brochure on New Direction Trust of Colorado. You don't have to use them, but Andy referred me to them 10 years ago. We do a lot of work with them. So you establish an account with them, an IRA or a Roth, you transfer in money, and then we call Miles Franklin and we buy whatever we're going to buy, and then they send your precious metals to New Directions and the depository that you're using. I put down, consider opening a Roth. If silver, God willing, is really 5 or 10 or 15 times possibly coming, wouldn't that be sweet to catch that in a tax-free account? So you can just convert. If you don't have a Roth, you can convert to a Roth or open a Roth. So that's the mechanics, pretty simple. So thanks for coming to the beautiful battleground. And it's time for Andy Schectman. And then after Andy, actually Andy has agreed, thank God, to talk through Q&A through dinner. So if you're hungry, go get the dinner, but come back and we'll answer. But anyway, please welcome the great Andy Schectman.
I think I gotta switch this. Hopefully I can figure it out. Kevin, will you do it?
Yeah.
Because I'll mess it up. How you all doing? I hope you're all doing well. While Kevin's setting this up, just a couple of things about me, my company, the way I look at the world. As Bob mentioned, I started Miles Franklin with my father. It'll be 36 years this February. We've done 13 billion in sales. We've never had a customer complaint, ever. Ever. You won't find one if you look. It's something we're very proud of. It is important to highlight the state of Minnesota. I moved from Minnesota 5 years ago in the midst of the George Floyd riots. I was doing 20 podcasts a week talking about gold from my basement in Minnetonka. And there were reports that Antifa was coming out to the suburbs. Don't answer your door past 7 p.m. The police won't come. Shelter in place. I looked at my wife and I said, this is not for me. I'm sleeping with a gun on my nightstand. We've had an office in Delray Beach for a very long time. We moved, picked up and left, something I never thought I would do. However, I left my corporation in Minneapolis, a very important part because Minnesota is the only state in America that regulates an industry that is federally non-regulated. So we are held to a much, much higher standard than just about everyone in the industry. Almost every company in America won't do business in Minnesota as a result. They would need to be subservient to the Department and Commissioner of Commerce with background checks annually, a $2 million surety bond, and continuing education and compliance that puts us on the same level as a FINRA-regulated brokerage. So in a world where, or in an industry where the product that you buy is homogenous, a gold eagle is a gold eagle, a gold bar is a gold bar, what separates us is our reputation and our accreditation. We're also one of only 27 companies that has ever been approved as an authorized reseller for the US Mint. Not one of the 7 primary distributors, but one of the 27 authorized resellers. Another feather in our cap, if you will. So that's who I am. When I started the company at 19 years old, my father said to me, one rule only. By the way, the name, my father's middle name is Miles, and his friend who lent us $60,000 in 1989 to start a company in an office the size of a closet before the internet, his middle name was Franklin. My dad said, you will not make the same mistakes that I made as a younger man. The only rule, or I'll fire you, is that you will buy something every 2 weeks when you get paid, period. I don't care if it's an ounce of silver, whatever it is, you'll buy it. Cool. Best gift I've ever been given. I've owned the company more or less outright for 20 years. I've run it for longer than that. I've honored my promise to my father. He won't fire me anymore, but talk to him every day. And I often tell him, thank him for that advice, to understand the power of compounding, the power of paying yourself first. For 36 years, I bought something every 2 weeks. I say this to you because to me, when I look at my gold and silver, it is wealth. It is not an investment. It is wealth, as Bob said, that has outlived everything the world has ever thrown at it for 6,000 years. 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic. And he mentioned kings and queens and pharaohs and empires, emperors. They never called their broker to buy gold. They owned it as a form of immutable wealth passed on through the generations. I look at it the same way. So as we talk about the reasoning to own gold and silver, please understand, I am not here to tell you to buy gold and silver to get wealthy. It is wealth, period. And they say history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. I would tell you that the most well-informed traders on the planet, where we are right now, have decided to, I believe, reintegrate gold into a monetary system that is unfolding right in front of us. The problem is, it's hidden from most of us. It's in plain sight if you look hard enough. That's what I do. I spend 3 to 5 hours a day, 7 days a week, scouring the world. And I've done over 5,000 YouTube podcasts talking about all of this stuff. And what's frightening to me, and I don't say this for any reason other than it's the truth, is that it frightens me that I've been right. I've said things for a long time that no one else did, and it's given me notoriety that it's come true. And it concerns me, and I think if you're not a contrarian, I think you need to at least start to let some of this sink in, because things are changing. I would argue we have entered a new monetary system, and I'll try to show you that. Anyways, we'll start with gold. One of the things that most people don't know, thanks to our media, that really doesn't do much except create divisiveness these days. Every media station Every radio, TV, newspaper, magazine, they're owned by 4 companies. And the information is filtered down that they want you all and us all to know. You have to dig beneath the surface in things that are not conventional in order to find truth. That is the truth. Anyways, gold is a tier 1 asset. Now that's something that may not mean a lot to you, but at the end of World War II, when the dollar took over for the pound sterling as the world reserve currency, it and U.S. Treasuries were labeled by central bank status as tier 1, riskless, the foundation of all money. Gold was always a tier 3 asset, where only half of its value was calculated on a balance sheet. As of 2019, Bank of International Settlements, the most powerful bank in the world, the central bank in Basel, Switzerland, said gold is now a tier 1 asset. When you realize that since 2017, 2 years before they mentioned this, the central banks have been buying gold and silver at a level the world has never seen before. I'll show you some slides to attest to that. But in essence, what they are saying is that it's as good as U.S. Treasuries, it's as good as the U.S. dollar, and when you compare the 3, gold has outperformed all of them handily over the last 25 years, and I'll show you some charts of that. But this is an important one. It's on par with dollars and treasuries as far as central banks are concerned. Nothing else is. We talk about returns. It's important. That's what it all boils down to, I guess. And sure, over the last 50 years, earning no interest, gold has outpaced the 10-year treasury. Over the last 25 years, gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury. Big difference between the two is that gold is an asset that is not simultaneously anybody else's liability. Nobody's. You hold it, no one knows about it but you. You can bury it in the ground in your backyard at midnight and become a midnight gardener. The point of it is that it's an asset that you hold outside the matrix that no one else in the world knows about, and it has value without being beholden to anyone else. Important characteristic. When we look at it, the S&P 500, over the last 25 years, if you were one of the 1%er who reinvested every bit of your dividends, that is how you make money in stocks. It's not by letting the indice go up, it's by reinvesting dividends. The problem is, dividend yield has been so small for a long time, most people really don't. But had you done it for the last 25 years, gold has averaged 9.9% since 2000, S&P 9.6, but this chart is 3 years. And I want to pay close attention to this chart. Sorry, I can't get close to that computer, I guess. Gold has beaten handily the S&P 500 over the last 3 years. What has the last 3 years been? But the biggest tech boom since the internet, maybe bigger, right? AI, NVIDIA, Apple, all of these companies that are taking advantage of artificial intelligence. It's been the biggest boom ever. And this pet rock that earns no interest somehow has outperformed it. Maybe it has something to do with the most well-informed traders in the world, the central banks, quietly exiting stage left with pockets full of gold while the rest of us are piling into the S&P. But I think it's very important because can you really expect to see these kinds of returns every year? My mentor, Richard Russell, used to say to me, Andy, if you make 7% a year, you will go down in the Investing Hall of Fame. Most people now are disenfranchised by 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% return. It's not good enough unless it's triple digit, like NVIDIA. Point of it is that through all of this boom in the S&P, gold has still outperformed it. Someone says to you when you ask them, should I own gold? Well, it doesn't pay any interest. Why the hell would you do that? All right, let's play that game. And you can go back as far as you want. Bob said 1900. In 1900, a $20 gold piece, to this point, 1 ounce of gold versus a $20 bill. A $20 bill or a $20 gold piece were the same thing. They were called gold certificates back then. That would have bought you a suit, a tie, an overcoat, shoes, the whole 9 yards. Today, 20 bucks barely buys you the shoelaces, but that 1 ounce of gold, 3,800 bucks, still 3,700 bucks, still buys you that suit. Well, how about this one? Should we take the gold Grandpa gave us at 35 bucks an ounce and buy the house in 1960, or should we save it for the kids that are coming? Let's stick it under the mattress. For 65 years, it's been sitting under the mattress, earning nothing but dust, because back then, with the average price of a house, that's from the Census Bureau, at 17,000 bucks, $35 an ounce gold is 455 ounces. Today, the average price of a home has popped to 403,000. So, you know, your dollar has certainly depreciated against real estate, or real estate has appreciated against your dollar very nicely. But those 455 ounces of gold sitting under your mattress collecting nothing but dust for 65 years now buys you 5 houses. The point of it is that you do not need interest on an asset that outpaces inflation. And it's done this as far back as you want to go. I could show you. If you want to go closer, you can go to 2005. I could show you every single example where this holds true. But here is the one thing that you should pay, I think, somewhat closer attention to. Really since 22, the central banks have been buying gold at a level the world has never seen. Now, the central banks are not just the wealthiest people in the world. They are the most well-informed people in the world. They are the decision makers. They are the ones that set monetary course for all of humanity, in essence. And the fact that they are buying this amount of gold, now I will also like to say there's been all sorts of reports, including from TD Bank in Canada, from the head of the IMF, from a guy named Vince Lancy, who's a genius in my industry, from all sorts of people who are saying up to 85% of the gold that the central banks are buying is not reported to the IMF. And in essence, if you knew that they reclassified gold tier 1 and everyone's buying it, maybe it would be better to keep it quiet as how much you are buying. If it is bought by a central bank and it is 24 karat gold, it must be reported to the IMF. But you have countries like China flying all around the world and buying doré and concentrate directly from the miners. By the way, they're the largest producer of gold in the world and the second largest producer of silver. They're flying all over Latin America and Mexico and buying doré, which is a crudely refined bar, and concentrate, which is a byproduct, and sending it back. By the way, they pay double what the West will. They ship it home to China. They refine it themselves. The central banks of the BRICS nations are buying gold and silver at levels that most of us can't even fathom and or appreciate, but I will tell you, these folks know what they're doing. But it's happening in this country now, and we'll get to that point. That's the difference. When the central banks do it, you should all pay attention. When the institutional traders in this country do it at a level that has never happened in the United States ever, you need to stand up and really pay attention, because things have all of a sudden changed. And here we go. The United States has become a net importer of gold for the first time ever. I take that back. At the end of World War II, when we said to the world, give us your gold, you've been through 2 world wars, we'll hold it safely, we'll pay you 35 bucks an ounce for it, you take the proceeds, put it in US Treasuries, you can earn a yield on that gold, which isn't earning any yield, and you can always give us back dollars, we'll give you your gold back at a fixed rate of 35 bucks an ounce. Until 1971, when President Nixon went back on his promise, because President de Gaulle from France said, you guys are printing more dollars to fund the Vietnam War than you have gold. So he sent warships to New York Harbor filled with dollars and said, give us the gold, and we did. And then shortly thereafter, Nixon said, that's it, we closed the gold window temporarily, it's never opened back up. We went back on our promise to the world, shockingly, and said, that's it, the dollars are no longer interchangeable with gold, it became fiat. A point that's worth making. 2 years later, Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and he struck a deal with the Saudis and said, we'll protect you, no one will ever mess with you, but you will take all of your oil sales will be made in dollars through OPEC globally, and the excess reserves go into US Treasuries. Keeps interest rates low, keeps asset prices high, keeps demand for the dollar strong across the globe. And it has been that way for 50 years until last year. Last year, the Saudis said, you know, we'll still take dollars, but we are at the 50th anniversary. We are going to not sign the exclusivity deal again. We're not going to re-up it. We'll still take dollars, We're going to take other things too. Now, that's a very big deal, a very big deal. A year before that, when we left Afghanistan, 2 years before that, Russia and Saudi Arabia, the day after we left Afghanistan, signed a joint military cooperation agreement. Let me say that one more time. Russia signed a joint military cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, who we had been protecting for 50 years, giving us the petrodollar hegemony. No longer. These are things you're not being told. These are things you must know, because this is changing globally right out from underneath you. And that's what I want to tell you. Silver. All of a sudden, the amount of silver coming into this country is off the charts. Billions and billions and billions of dollars per week and month have been coming into the United States since November. What happened in November? The election. Who won? President Trump. Somebody got to him and said, if we don't do this, we're dead in the water, because the rest of the world is. And since November, what we know of, it's been between 150 and 200 billion dollars worth of gold and silver have come into the COMEX, much of it leaving, some of it staying. But ask yourself, who's got that kind of bread? And why don't we hear anything about it? I hear nothing about it, and I scour to find out who the hell it is. My guess, a lot of it points to the Treasury Department, Scott Bessent, under the guise of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. National security, don't need to tell Congress, shh, don't tell anyone. But I will tell you, the amount coming in is so far off the chart, an anomaly. It would be 85 degrees here January 1. They're not going to open the course. It's an anomaly. That's what this is. You must pay attention. When the most sophisticated traders around the globe do it, great. When they're doing it here, never happened before. Wake up. It's a big deal. And these are the numbers. I don't need to belabor the issue, but these are the numbers that prove it. This is a year-over-year change, about 3 times what we were buying last year in May, 9.5 times what we bought from the following May or the previous May. The amount of gold and silver coming in is so far off the charts, it's insane. And I can't really stress that enough, because it's never happened before. We were net exporters of gold my whole 36-year career. Since the last 50, 60 years we've been net exporters. Now all of a sudden we're the biggest importer in the world. Secretary Bessent, this is something where it starts to move towards the big money in this country, acknowledging it. And I think Secretary Bessent is kind of at the heart of all of this. I know you can't read it back there, so I'll try and read this quickly. He was on Tucker Carlson on April 3rd, and he said, when I had my hedge fund, by the way, he ran a hedge fund before being the Treasury Secretary, people might have called me a gold bug. Gold historically has been a store of value. Gold can't have a fiscal problem. Gold can't have a gigantic budget deficit. Gold cannot have a war. He went on to say that we are going to have some kind of a grand global economic reordering. I'd like to be part of it. I've studied this. I would like to be part of the Bretton Woods realignment. What was Bretton Woods? That was 1944 when we took over for the pound sterling. The IMF was founded. The dollar became the world reserve currency. He wants to be part of a new one. Interesting. By the way, a couple of years ago, the IMF had on their website, we want all of the countries, about 150 of them, Western friendly, said, we want a new Bretton Woods. A new Bretton Woods is coming. A new monetary system is here. And it started with the Genius Act that was just passed. Sovereign asset monetization. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet, he says, for the American people. There'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country, as we work to bring them out for the American people. Okay, this part is disgusting, all right? U.S. government balance sheet, $5 trillion. That's it. U.S. government, not the United States, U.S. government asset balance sheet, $5 trillion. To Bob's point, liabilities approaching 200 trillion. We all talk about the 37 trillion, but that excludes Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, government and military pensions. 200 versus 5. Not real good. Who knows, and none of you can answer back there, what the largest asset is on the U.S. government balance sheet? Anyone have a guess? Anybody?
Fort Knox.
Fort Knox hasn't been audited since 1953, and it's not even in the top 3. Anyone else? Okay, well, let's do it this way. Number 3 is land. I guess you could monetize land. You could put some hotels and some amusement parks on national property. Number 2 is military. You're not going to monetize or remonetize bullets and military bases and guns. The number 1 largest asset of the United States government is student debt. Of 45% of their asset base, they passed a law about 10 years ago. Even if you go bankrupt, they'll take your Social Security. You cannot get out of student debt. It is a receivable on their balance sheet. It is the largest balance sheet of the land of the free and the home of the brave, or should I say, the land of the broke. We are insolvent. We are completely and totally broke as a nation, and it's never talked about, but it is happening, and the trend is increasing at exponential pace. You know, he says we're doing $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. He's right. Anyone know how long 1 trillion seconds was? 31,688 years ago. That's 1 trillion seconds. And we are indebting your children and grandchildren to the tune of $1 trillion every 100 days. It took us well over 100 years to get the first trillion, and now we're doing it every 3 months. Talk about a change happening. This one caught me by surprise. On Easter Sunday, President Trump, the golden rule of negotiating and success. He who has the gold makes the rules. Now, what the hell does that mean? Does that tell you something? The Treasury Secretary is a gold bug. Gold has been reclassified Tier 1. Massive imports into this country, unlike anything the world has ever seen. Treasury Secretary wants to preside over a new monetary system, and President Trump says, he who has the gold makes the rules. The dots are starting to connect. Now, you can't make this part up. Many of the gold accounts around the world are held on balance sheets called the gold revaluation account. Gold has been revalued many times around the world, 3 times in this country. The last time it happened was in 72 and 73. Nixon closed the gold window at 70 and 71 at 35. He devalued the dollar by 8% in 72, making gold 38, and then the following year devaluing the dollar again, making it 42.22, where it's been on the books ever since. 42.22 is the official price of gold on the US government balance sheet. But the better example is President Roosevelt in 33 when he confiscated gold at $20 an ounce, paid all of the people $20.67. Got a bonus. A dozen eggs were a nickel, 67 was a lot. And then he immediately devalued the dollar by 40%, making it $35 an ounce. The premise here that I want you to understand is it's not about revaluing gold, it's about devaluing the dollar. He's going to do it. Stephen Mirren just took over the empty spot at the Federal Reserve. He is the architect of the Mar-a-Lago Accord. He's the one who wrote it, which speaks to a devalued dollar to bring back manufacturing. We'll talk about that in a moment. But over the last few years, the head of the Dutch National Bank, let's revalue gold. The head of the German Bundesbank, let's revalue gold to offset the liabilities on our balance sheet. Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, let's revalue gold. She just said this at the Bitcoin conference to take some of the proceeds to buy Bitcoin for a national stockpile. And Judy Shelton, who you're going to see in a moment, who I had on my YouTube channel, I interviewed her, one of the most brilliant people I have ever met in my life. She was President Trump's nominee to run the Federal Reserve in 2016. She said to me, and you'll hear her say it in her own words, Andy, July 4th, 2026 is a very big day for President Trump. It is the 250th anniversary of the United States. He's going to go and do very big things, including pegging gold to the US Treasury market. On the 50-year Treasury, we're going to issue a 50-year Treasury. If you read her book, she talks about a 5, 10, 20, 30, and 50-year Treasury, where the 30 and the 50-year Treasury have 1% interest or less. The others have 0 interest, but all redeemable in gold. And we'll talk about at the end when I try and connect the dots why they would do that. But the first thing you would do is bring back all the gold, which is now Tier 1, and your Treasury Secretary loves it, and connect the dots. We'll start to see this is happening. All right, let's listen to Judy's own words, what she said, and pay close attention because this is as big of a deal as I've ever seen in my career. See if I can do this without it squealing.
I think it would fit in beautifully with what President Trump is introducing in terms of a renaissance of American economic recovery based on entrepreneurial energy. And I love that he refers to a golden age for America. I think on July 4th, 2026, which he plans to celebrate big time as the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding, U.S. Treasury, for the first time in over 50 years, should establish a link between the U.S. dollar and gold by issuing 50-year Treasury bonds. It's something discussed when I was on transition with the first Trump administration at Treasury. They looked at 50-year. France has a 50-year. But they decided 30 is, investors are fine with 30-year. Do a 50-year bond, and at maturity, it'll have a face value of the dollar. At maturity, bondholders can take either the dollars or the gold. Fixed rate of convertibility, preset, so they know they can have gold. And I think that would send such a signal that we are truly moving towards sound finances. We see that with Doge, fantastic. Let's do it on the monetary side.
Okay, now I'm going to tell you why she's going to do that at the end. Why they're going to do it, and I'm convinced they are going to do it. They're not going to peg the dollar to gold and peg the treasury market to gold. And I'll tell you why in a moment. We'll keep going first. I'm going to talk about silver before I connect all of the dots. Silver is the value of a generation, and I mean that. I don't tell people to buy this stuff to get rich. I think silver offers that. I think silver is a very unique asset, very, very unique for many reasons. The word that comes to mind immediately is asymmetric, which means low downside, high upside. I have never seen an asset that has quite that kind of asymmetric setup. I'll show you why. If you asked a technical analyst at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, don't tell them what that is. That's a 45-year chart of gold from 1975 to today. And you ask them, is that a very bullish chart? They would say to you, a 45-year cup and handle is as rare as a four-leaf clover. And if it really, truly is a 45-year cup and handle formation, it is probably the most bullish technical chart you could think of. That's 45 years of coiled energy. I'll show you how it works. The analyst would say, here's the top of the coffee cup right here at 50 bucks in 1980. Here's the bottom at $4 in the 90s. 2011, finished the top of the cup, 50 bucks. The handle, almost there. We're at, on the futures. Kevin, what are we at on futures right now for silver? Sorry, I made to catch you off guard.
Sorry. 45.30.
All right, so we're $4.70 away from breaking the top of the cup. The analyst would tell you that once it breaks that cup level, you take the top and the bottom, the distance between is 46, add it to the top, your next projection target is $96. That is what they would tell you, no matter what the asset is. This is as bullish of a signal as you could find in investing, period. The length of time makes it exponentially more bullish. It's coiled energy. This is something I never thought I'd see. I mean, this is as bullish as it gets. So on one hand, they're saying all this stuff about gold, but 2 weeks ago, they reclassified silver as a critical mineral. Critical mineral. The US government just put a floor under the price of gold. Maybe this is why we've seen billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of gold come in every single week into COMEX since November. Never happened like this before, ever. You know what? I think you put up the old one, Kevin.
I put the only one that's on there.
Did you put that new one? Because, no, all right. Well, I had a slide in here, and I'll just talk about it. Bob wanted me to talk about it. The metal in London right now metal in London. The LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Association, is the oldest precious metals market in the world. It's 140 years old. It is being bled dry by countries around the world and by the United States. They have in their vaults right now only 145 million ounces of silver. They call that the free float. They are trading 600 million ounces of deliverable spot contracts per day. There is up to 2 billion ounces in contracts that can stand for delivery against 145 million ounce float. What can possibly go wrong? They have less than 1 day's, about 4 hours worth of trading. And you just had one of the head traders from TD Bank say if it continues like this within 4 months, and I'd say it's much less than that, the London metals market can absolutely have zero silver left to deliver. London is the delivery mechanism. All of that stuff that's coming to the United States, an overpreponderance of it has come from London. And I said 5-6 months ago when all that was coming in, because it's tariffs. I said, the hell it is tariffs. It ain't tariffs. They're just saying that. They're reshoring it. They're telling them it's tariffs so that they don't catch on to what they're doing. They would be crowded out of their trade if the US government all of a sudden wanted all the gold and silver. Don't you think the rest of the world would wake up and beat them at their own game? And then he comes out and says, yeah, we're not going to tariff gold. Of course you're not. They have literally emptied the LBMA. It's about as big of a deal as you can get because there is no more silver to find. It's disappearing. And I'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of it disappearing, it's found in nature in a form called epithermal, right near the surface, like your skin is epidermis. The big deposits were found years ago. They mined 850 million ounces last year. The demand was about 1.2 billion. It's been that way for 5 years. But of all of the silver mined last year, of 850 million, less than 200 million came from silver mining companies. They can't find it anymore. It's byproduct mining of other companies mining other stuff that stumble across some silver. It's literally disappearing. There is a branch of the US government, the Geological Survey branch of the US government, Google it, it'll pop right up. They just came out and said they would have estimated it could be the first element struck from the periodic table of elements as it is disappearing in nature. And it all started, much of this started by weaponizing the dollar, by telling Russia, you're kicked out of SWIFT, and you know the 5 billion in treasuries we're holding, it's ours now. We defaulted on them in essence, and we gave it largely in the form of weapons issued through the military-industrial complex. They're the ones holding silver down. We can talk about that in the Q&A. They don't want silver up because that's how you make high-tech weapons. 500 ounces in the tip of every cruise missile. But when we said that to Russia, the game ended right there. The rest of the world has now formed into groups, in particular the BRICS, to push back against the hegemony. They look at a country like ours, who I thank God every day I was born into, and say, okay, so you guys came into Iraq 22 years ago looking for weapons that weren't there. You destroyed the country. You toppled the regime, and you're still there 22 years later? But Russia can do what they want, they can't do what they want to do in their own mind to defend their interests. It is not for you to be judge, jury, and executioner, right? If you're the world reserve currency, that's not up to you. That's for world opinion. When we cross that line, saying what we do doesn't matter, but what you do does, the beginning of the end for the US dollar, and in particular the US Treasury, started. The clock started right there. That's when all of this started. There is now an alternative issue to the US dollar in terms of settlement. And it has been created by the BRICS and by the Chinese, largely through the BIS Innovation Hub, who has pulled out of it. But now the Chinese are running it, and it was called M-Bridge, now it's called the Renminbi Cross-Border Payment System. I'm not going to go deep into this, but we can talk about it in Q&A. But all you need to know is this, that this is a system that settles in 7 seconds, not the 3 to 5 days that SWIFT takes. It settles outside of the SWIFT purview. They've already signed up 10 countries from Southeast Asia. The acronym is ASEAN, ASEAN, and 6 Middle Eastern countries. Those countries in Southeast Asia have double the population of the United States, 800 million, and they are China's largest trading partner by far. So they are able to settle cross-border payments on whatever goods they're buying from China back and forth using a system that is not interfered with by SWIFT, settles in 7 seconds, and now you have 38% of global trade already signed up. But it gets bigger than that. Actually, it gets much bigger than that. The BRICS, you see the BRICS continuing to grow. And this is what gave me notoriety. I talked about this on thousands of videos starting in 2019. Everyone told me I was crazy, and all of a sudden, I've been proven right in spades. And this is why I get asked on 20 podcasts a week to talk about the BRICS. 59 nations have applied to the BRICS. They already have 11. Saudi Arabia has been admitted into the BRICS. They're straddling. They were one of the designers and full participants in the cross-border payment system. They are. The Chinese are building a series of multi-jurisdictional vaults that they're spreading all around the world. And the next one that is being built is under construction right now in Saudi Arabia. And they will trade with one another over this cross-border payment system. And the Chinese have made digital yuan immediately convertible into gold right now in the first multi-jurisdictional vault that was built outside of Shanghai in Hong Kong. You can take your yuan, send it to that vault, and you can get gold. You do not need to convert to dollars. In essence, the yuan is as good as gold right now. And when you have the second vault being built in Saudi Arabia, do we see a problem here? Remember, what is it that made the dollar the reserve currency? That's right, it was protecting the Saudis and the exclusivity deal, which they didn't re-up. Oh, crap. And now they're building a vault, part of the Shanghai Metals Exchange, where gold will be stored in Saudi Arabia so they can buy, Chinese can buy the Saudi oil, pay for it in digital yuan over the cross-border payment system, free from SWIFT interference, settles in 7 seconds at a 98% reduction in fees. But I don't want the yuan. I'll take the gold, thanks, and we have it right here in our backyard. They're going to build them all across the Belt Road Initiative, which we'll talk about in 1 second. When this came out a few weeks ago, this is the biggest threat to the dollar. People would say to me, I would speak at conferences, and there would be very, very well-known people. A guy named Brent Johnson, who has the milkshake theory, smart dude. Andy, the BRICS isn't big enough, it's not gonna matter, they can't compete. Sergey Lavrov just said, we're opening this technology up to the entire world with the exception of the dollar, the pound, and the countries in the European Union. 90% of human population, 90%. As it is right now, they already represent over 60% of human population, 50% of global GDP, 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals, the majority of all the commodity production, the majority of all the trade routes on sea, on land. And now they're opening up to everybody else but the West to trade outside the purview of the SWIFT, to settle imbalances in gold. And he said, we are now opening it up throughout the Belt Road Initiative. You probably don't know about this either. It's a crime that you don't. It's been going on for a long time. It's the largest infrastructure project in human history. China's endeavor to create a series of roads and bridges and maritime channels and trade routes that represent 75% of human population. Much of these countries are underdeveloped and massively resource rich, so they build oil and gas refineries, they build gold mines, they build the roads, the bridges, they build the infrastructure, let these countries become wealthy, and they get a piece of it. This new technology is immediately being rolled out among 75% of the world's population. Why is the dollar so strong? Because every damn country has had to use it to transact business. So if you chip away at the settlement status, if much of the world isn't going to use dollars anymore, what happens to the dollar? Worse yet, if you don't take the proceeds, excess, and put them into treasuries, and instead you put it into gold, which is the whole premise of what they're doing. What is gold? The only other tier 1 asset other than US treasuries. Do you see how this works? We trade in our local currencies. We build our own economy. What the hell do we need to build the US economy for? And then we settle imbalances in gold. Interesting. They also have something called BRICS Pay, which is now being rolled out under the same sweeping area all around the world. It is business to business. It's like a credit card or an app. If you live in Brazil and you travel to Russia, boom, you just buy it and it instantly converts. No messing around, free from SWIFT interference, free from the Western interference, completely. So it's B2B and central bank to central bank, connecting up to 90% of the world's population. But you're right, Brent. You're right, that's not big enough. Brent doesn't know what he's talking about. Here's your new monetary system. Have any of you heard of this Genius Act that was just passed? Anyone know what it is? Anybody? This is my point, you guys. This is my point. The fact that this isn't screamed about is a travesty, right? What is the Genius Act? The Genius Act basically says that now every bank around the world that transacts in dollars, every credit card company, every insurance company, every major player, instead of transacting dollars through wires or checks, will now issue stable coins. Stablecoin is just a fancy way to say a dollar-based digital asset. Every single stablecoin will be backed by what? Any guess? No. Yes and no. They are buying gold, but backed by U.S. Treasuries, up to 2 years in duration. So you are now creating synthetic demand for the Treasury instead of organic demand. Interesting. We call it genius and stable. Stable being backed by debt. So every time a stable coin is issued, every time your new bank way of transmitting money, you go to buy a new car, you won't have to send a wire, you will send your stable coin like that off your app, bang. And every time you do that, it gives more energy to buy U.S. Treasuries. Now those U.S. Treasuries, they are not paid, the interest is not paid to us. The issuer keeps it. The issuer then takes the interest that they get from the Treasury, issuing the stable coins, and buys what? More Treasuries. Isn't that funny? Debt buying more debt, and Bitcoin and gold. Tether, the biggest issuer of stable coins in the world, was just last week at the Beaver Creek Gold Summit. They're buying stuff directly from the mines right now, and they're buying mining companies. They will buy gold, why? Not to jack the place up, sure, but to devalue the dollar. They will buy Bitcoin, not to jack Bitcoin up, but to devalue the dollar. And they will buy treasuries. Why? Because no one wants them anymore. Let's talk about that for 1 second. This year, 10-year treasury that was paying you 4%, 4.5%, 8 months through the year, you've got 3% return. The dollar's down 11%. See that as a good investment? That's negative 9% return so far. And this is only going to increase as the world does not want our treasuries anymore, because guess what? You end up on the wrong side of the United States, they're going to take it from you. President Trump is issuing tariffs against everyone, but they're not tariffs, they're sanctions. A tariff is issued to protect your manufacturing. If you want to join the BRICS, I'm going to tariff you 150%. That ain't a tariff, that's a sanction. This incentivizes all of these countries to move away from the dollar and to join a new system where there is strength in numbers. And when you talk about how indebted we are, do you know that the Congressional Budget Office said that in 5 years, 6 years, 100% of tax revenue goes to pay just the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement like Social Security. That means military, which is a discretional endeavor. We have to borrow money from the world who doesn't like us to fund the military to go around and police the world. Do you see how this is becoming a problem? Things are changing. So the Genius Act is the beginning of a new monetary system because the demand for treasuries is dying. So now what I want to do, I think it's this slide. Yeah, that's it. Let me connect the dots for you, all right? First of all, best place to put your money to make a return, in my opinion, without question, is silver, period. And you still have time left. And I think it's a generational opportunity. But the dots need to be connected here, all right? So, what does President Trump want to do? And if there is any nobility in what he wants to do, this will take 3 minutes, and then I'll take questions. What does he want to do? He wants to bring back manufacturing. How do you bring back manufacturing? 60% of this country has no college education. 60%. What's AI gonna do to the jobs? Kneecap them. What are our kids and grandkids gonna do? If we don't bring back manufacturing, we're dead, period. End of story. We cannot have the rest of the world make our military components, our aircraft parts, our pharmaceuticals, everything. We can't have it, it's over. The reason this happened is something called Triffin's dilemma. Triffin's dilemma is an age-old economic theory that, by the way, Vice President Vance has written about on White House letterhead, that being the world reserve currency is not something that is advantageous anymore. It is a subsidy to all of us, but a massive drag on production in this country. Because what happens is, the entire world needs US dollars to transact business, and we can't give them enough through trade alone. So, in order for them to conduct business, they have to sell their currency, which pushes it down, to buy our currency to conduct business, pushes it up. And over time, you continue to do that, well, geez, I can send my manufacturing to those guys because it's at a third the cost or more. So you hollow out your manufacturing. That is the whole premise of Triffin's dilemma. And Vice President Vance says, you know what? It's not a good deal anymore, including the lead economic advisor of the Biden administration. He was a complete and total knucklehead, but he said the exact same thing. He wrote about it in the Wall Street Journal. It is not a good deal for the US to have the world reserve currency anymore. My thesis, which I have said publicly, and it is now coming true for over 6 months, is they will default on the world reserve status. They're going to. Here's how it plays out. So, you want to bring back manufacturing, you know you can't do it with Triffin's dilemma being the world reserve currency. So what do? Well, the first thing that you do is you devalue the dollar massively. How do you devalue the dollar? You revalue gold. If you listen to my interview with Judy, and I say to her, Judy, gold is held in the revaluation account. Will it be revalued? Absolutely, she says. There's a man who talks about this a lot. There are several people who talk about it. In fact, the Federal Reserve just wrote a paper on it last month. Gold revaluation, a theory. Should we do it? James Rickards is a man many of you may know. James has been employed by the Pentagon to simulate financial war games. James Rickards says $24,000 is their number they're going to revalue it to. Crazy, right? Mike Maloney says 10,000. Mike gets there by dividing M1, money supply, into gold. James does it by M2. Let's pretend James is right for 1 minute and see what it does. Every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would give the Treasury General Account $1 trillion free and clear. It's an accounting gimmick, mind you. If it went to 24,000, the Treasury would issue gold certificates to the Federal Reserve. And they then hold those gold certificates as collateral against the gold. They don't get to keep the gold no matter what. The gold belongs to the American people, but they are owed the money, the fiat value of it, right? The Federal Reserve pushes a button and creates money out of thin air. This is exactly what President Roosevelt did. Gives it to the Treasury, $6 trillion to start to pay down the debt. The dollar is devalued by 60% overnight. Ooh, interesting. What would happen if you had a massively devalued dollar? It might be easier to sell your manufacturing across the globe, wouldn't it? How do you get your manufacturing back at interest rates that will go higher and higher and higher as we get more and more and more into debt, right? How? I got an idea. You peg gold to the back end of the Treasury market with zero coupon, zero interest. You bring back your manufacturing at no borrowing costs. Yes, you have to deliver the gold in 20 years. Zero borrowing costs. You bring it all back in a massively devalued dollar, and you begin to grow your way out of this problem. But how does the government operate then? Oh, that's right. We create something called the Genius Act. And every single dollar that is sent around the globe, all over the place, will be backed by US Treasuries. How do you like that for a good idea? And the proceeds, the interest that is added to between the Treasury and the issuance of the stablecoin, the issuer will take it and buy more treasuries. And then they'll buy more gold and more Bitcoin, which will continue to devalue the dollar and push interest rates down. Now, the byproduct of this, you can see President Trump get on stage and say something like this. Being the world reserve currency has been a wonderful experience. It's come to an end. It has given us low interest rates, high asset prices, and cheap goods. But it's no longer something beneficial to this country. We need to bring back our manufacturing for our children and our grandchildren. And it's going to be painful. It's the Shawshank Redemption when Andy Dufresne crawled through that tube. That wasn't fun, but he got to the other end. went like that, right, in the rain and wiped off all the crap. Well, we have to crawl through the tube. I could see him saying we will be starting universal basic income right now for the next 24 months. And at that time, we will have reshored all of our manufacturing, and once again, we can be the leaders, not only of movies in Hollywood and intellectual property, IT in California, and financial assets on Wall Street. We will now make things again. We will lead the world in manufacturing. We will grow our way out of this problem. My mentor, Richard Russell, used to say the Fed has two choices but to inflate or die, inflate or default. This is option 3. You destroy the dollar to support the bond market, to bring back manufacturing, you peg it to gold, you have this stupid thing called the Genius Act that gives artificial demand for a treasury which is dying, which holds up, gives the government the ability to operate until we bring back manufacturing and grow our way out of it. Now, the people who don't have assets are dead because things are going to get very expensive. They will use universal basic income. This is why you see the big money buying gold and silver and assets. Assets in this environment, in inflation, will do very well. Assets will kill it. Saving in dollars won't. The dollar is down 11% so far this year, but go back to that slide. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll take questions, and this is a trend that's been going on forever. My father said to me, you know, your mom and I got married in 1963, Andy, when I graduated college, and my first job out of college was with Helene Curtis, a cosmetic company. And I got paid $6,000 a year, and your mom and I lived comfortably. I said, no way. I Googled it. Average salary in '63 was $10,000. First job out of college, great. How the hell does anyone live for a year, 2 people, on $6,000? Well, this is what happens when the dollar is insidiously devalued. We're at that point where it's not slowly devaluing anymore. It is exponentially devaluing. When we see $1 trillion worth of additional debt added every 100 days, you save in dollars, you're in trouble. You own assets, you got a chance. And that is why you buy gold. Silver, on the other hand, one last piece, it is used by the military-industrial complex to create high-tech weapons. This is why there are 8 Western banks, 8, that have held the largest concentrated short position on the COMEX market, meaning they step on it by selling it. They have so much money, they just keep selling and selling and selling, and they overwhelm the market, piss everyone off, and they all go somewhere else, because you need it to make high-tech weapons in order to sell them all around the world. Remember when we were warned about the military-industrial complex? They make weapons that need copious amounts of silver. It is not the price they're worried about, because it's 500 ounces in a missile that costs $15 million. They don't care. It's the fact that if people understand how valuable it is, and now they've given up on that by reclassifying it critical. But a company like BlackRock, which is the primary custodian of SLV, the world's largest silver trust, along with JP Morgan, who paid a $920 million fine to the Justice Department, the largest fine ever issued for manipulating silver, they're the custodians, yet they're still allowed to be the custodian. BlackRock also owns the majority of all the military manufacturers who are creating the weapons, needing silver, in order to sell them all around the world, create war, blow up Syria, blow up Ukraine, and who gets the reconstruction projects? That's right, it's BlackRock. Do you see how this works? This is a game that worked forever, but now the countries in the global south, that used to be third world, India and China, good 1-2 punch there, are now very wise to what we are doing, and they're beating us at our own game by standing for delivery, meaning, last point, when you have a contract, whether it be in London or on the COMEX market in New York, there are 3 options. You can cash settle at maturity, meaning you pay the value. You can roll it forward to the next month, or you can stand for delivery. In my career, less than 1% of contracts ever stood for delivery, ever, less than 1. In the first 3 days of the September contract, 3 days, this is just the first 3 days, in gold, 2,160 contracts came up for settlement. Now, that means these people either need to roll it to the next delivery month, pay a little fee, and go out another month, cash settle, give me the cash, or stand for delivery. Remember, less than 1% ever stood. 100% on over 2 million ounces of gold, $4 billion stood for delivery. Everyone, give me the gold, give me the gold, give me the gold, give me the gold, give me the gold. Same thing with silver. Who's got this money in the United States that keeps doing this every single week since November to about $200 billion that we know of? So I guess the bottom line is that if I leave you with anything, it is that the most important thing to do is own assets, and do not keep your money in dollars, or you're destined to have big problems. And I think it's assets that feed you, liabilities that eat you, and there is no bigger liability right now than the US dollar. So I will turn it over to Bob and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Too bad he's not passionate. Before we take questions, I would just want to ask you, could we talk about, we realize the reasons to get some money out of the paper. The big guys, the hedge funds and the central banks buy the real stuff, right? We don't want paper. Can you talk a little bit about the ratio of gold to silver and why we're leaning towards silver so much versus gold?
So this is the whole concept of the military-industrial complex. You go back 5,000 years and you see a gold to silver geologic ratio, we'll call that God's ratio of 16 to 1, where 16 ounces of silver are found in the Earth's crust to every 1 ounce of gold. For 5,000 years, even when Sir Isaac Newton was figuring out the relationship gold to silver in the UK Mint a million years ago, it was 16 to 1. Now I have a friend named Keith Newmeyer. He is the CEO of First Majestic Silver, one of the biggest silver companies in the world, who tells me all the time, has been telling me for years, and now he says it publicly, that the geologic ratio is 7 to 1. Remember what I said about silver being found near the top? And of all of the silver mined last year, only 20% came from companies that mine silver. The rest is byproduct. Silver is disappearing, but the military-industrial complex needs to keep silver stepped on. The ratio right now in the ground is 7 to 1. For every 1 ounce of gold, they have 7 ounces of silver. It's disappearing. Yet man's ratio, the price, because of the manipulation, is at 88 to 1. So if all that were to happen was that it were to get anywhere near its geologic ratio, which over time it has to, you could argue that silver is 11 to 12 times undervalued geologically. And over time, when you have this kind of demand all of a sudden and it's reclassified as a critical mineral, those things will change. There are very few things where you could actually say, is it realistic to expect a 11-fold return? Yeah, I guess it is. When it's this far suppressed, it's the value of a generation because of the hubris and the stupidity of the West, who have been caught at their own game. And these countries around the world are using this leverage against us by standing for delivery, which never happened. And you cannot naked suppress things where at the end you have to find it to deliver when you have to cover if you don't have it. If it's disappearing, it is an existential threat to these players, and they are all running for the hills and covering their positions, because if you are short to this degree, when all the big money is saying, I want the real thing now, game's over, and expect the price to really take off. Don't know how high, don't know when, but in a world of probabilities, I would say there's a high probability that you ain't seen nothing yet in silver.